Everybody, it's Eric at Nailed or Failed Reviews, and today we're finishing up part 2 of the installation of the 2008 Toyota Tundra Water Pump replacement along with the other cooling component parts. We're going to be doing the full installation video for you guys today, starting from where we left off in part 1 where we had torn everything out. So in this video we're going to show you how to put everything back together in each step to help you guys do it a lot quicker than I did. We're also going to be finishing up the video with a long-term review of the other cooling components that I installed 92,000 miles ago when I did the radiator replacement. So stay tuned for that so you can see how well all these parts held up. But right now we're going to finish up part 2 of the full installation of a 2008 Toyota Tundra Water Pump along with all the other cooling components. Let's check it out now on Nailed or Failed Reviews. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the water pump back on. We have everything clean here. You can see everything. Clean the face, brake cleaner down here on the body. Make sure you cover up your alternator down here. You'll see these little holes in your alternator. Cover that up if you're going to be spraying brake cleaner or water. Here. And these bolts, some of these have corrosion on them, so I'm just taking the wire brush and brushing that off and then putting a dab of anti-seize on there. So I'll put one of these bottom ones in so I can get sort of the corners lined up. And you know, one of the rules is don't tighten everything down. Don't tighten one bolt like the first one you put in. Don't tighten it all the way down. You want to start putting all these in here and just put them in loosely, and then we'll tighten them down in a pattern. So what I'm double checking here is that there's 3 bolts that hold on the housing for the thermostat, and so you saw me sort of doing the right side of the water pump with all the bolts first, and some of the top ones, but so I have the bottom ones in, and then I have the ones on the right side in, and then the one on the top here. Oops, where was that? Now we have these 3 bolts, 1, 2, 3 here, are really specific ones because there's, if you remember when we took this off, there was this back one here that actually you can only access when this housing is off of the water pump body. So you can see it's going to fit on just over that gasket. So we need to get in this other 14 millimeter that holds, so it's only 12 millimeters that's holding these in, the 12 millimeter bolt heads. So we need to get in this 14 millimeter, this last one, and then this 12 millimeter one back here. So just, you know, double check yourself. Okay, so once you get all your bolts in on the water pump body, you're going to want to tighten them down, and for those of you who don't know, you want to start tightening them in a cross pattern. Never tighten them sequentially, one after another. You tighten one and then tighten the opposite, and then tighten the opposite from that and across from that, and on and on and on. You're also going to feel after the initial tightening that it keeps going, that you're going to go to another bolt and it's going to keep tightening down. What you're feeling is you're compressing the actual rubber gasket under the water pump body. It's a pretty thick piece of rubber, so just be aware that don't quit after doing your initial tightening. You're going to have to keep going until you actually feel the majority of these bolts. They'll just feel like they just stop, and that means you have the gasket completely compressed. Once you get all these 12 and 14 millimeter bolt heads on the water pump body, then you can move on to tightening down the 3 12 millimeter bolt heads for the thermostat housing body. And once that's done, then everything is completely bolted back on for the water pump and the thermostat. Okay, so now we got the water pump body itself all tightened down. Again, you got two 14 millimeters, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 12 millimeters that you need to tighten down. So 3 12 millimeter bolts, and then you're going to have this back hose here is going to go up onto this one. I don't know what it goes to. And then this is the one that has the tiny little hose on it. That's a real pain in the ass. So what we're going to do is, first of all, because I took the hose off just to clean off everything, is we're not going to mount the hose onto the assembly. We're not going to mount it onto here like this and then push it onto there. I wish I could, but this is in the way of this bolt right here. As you can take some rubbing alcohol. Rubbing alcohol is good because it evaporates and doesn't corrode stuff, and you can just spray it on both things, and then you can be generous with it. And then this will allow you to slide this tube up and over and out of the way and onto that hard tubing. Make sure you hold on to it, because remember, you remove the support bracket, so you don't want to jack it up. So you'll hold it, you'll leave it there, and then when we once we get everything else mounted and get these bolts tightened down for sure, then when we get the body, this housing back on here, we'll spray some more rubbing alcohol on there and slide it back on, and then reattach our two clamps here on either side. The lower bolt first. Okay, so now we're going to slide this tube over. I'm just going to spray this. Hopefully there's still some under there. Alright, so I'm gonna remount my supports first. Alright, and you just push that back over, and you can see that slid right back over into place. And when you take it off, you know, if you leave your clamps over here on the hard line, then they'll be easy to just slide right back over. Now remember, when you're putting your clamps on, that sometimes these tabs that you use to work the clamp could possibly get in the way of another hose or something, so just be aware of where you're putting them, and you might have to move them at some point. I'm hoping that these will be okay right here. This hose needs to go back like this, so it looks like those are okay like that. Okay, so for the time being, I'm going to leave this off so that I can attach the pulley. So I'll leave that there. I think now I'll take this opportunity to actually replace that pulley. since I have everything off. Okay, so now we're going to be mounting. We got the water pump, we got the thermostat body mounted up. Let's see, what else do we need to do here? Actually, before we put this pulley wheel on, we need to finish our clamp over here. And this is again why I left the thermostat body off, is because it makes it easier to reach the clamp for this back hose that we had to take off. So get this. Alright, so now while I'm here, I might as well put my thermostat back on. Okay, and definitely someone might argue that it would be easier to put the thermostat on the body itself first, and I wouldn't disagree, but I thought it might be easier to get this clamp on, but I'd say put the thermostat on first. I got this ratcheting box in that'll do me good. So I'll get just gonna put this hose back onto there. Just get this closed up. I should have put the tensioner on first. So let me do that. Okay, so now I got the pulley mounted onto the actual water pump itself, so we got that back on there. Again, we got the thermostat on, so I'll just, you guys just have to get your screwdriver in there and your 12mm and go around and just, make sure you got your screwdriver secured on there correctly so that you can torque these bolts down. Okay, so that's done. And so now I can get this tube back on. We'll get the throttle body back on. So now we'll put this tube back onto here, and then we can put the throttle body on, hook these hoses back up. So go on there just like that. You could do this last if you want to get the belt on first, but we'll just get it on there. Oops. I got my throttle body is all nice and clean. And so those tubes will tuck down under there, and then your throttle body will just sit on there. And those tubes just hook right back up, there and there. Okay, so I'll get this back on here. Okay, so I got my fan clutch mounted back on, and everything is back on now. So we've got the pulley, is the idler pulley, the tensioner is back on there. Everything is tightened up. I've got my air filter back on, and my harness hooked back up to the throttle body. And this is where you're going to want to get this diagram printed out and just have it sitting there for yourself. I don't really know. I forget the best way to do this. Like I said, I did this before. But I'm just gonna sort of wing it here, and you guys can follow along on the video. So start on the compressor for the air conditioner. Go up over the fan. Make sure I get it twisted. This up and over the fan. Back down. over the crankshaft, over belt tensioner, and back down. So you got to get under there, and there's a pin that they put in there that holds it in place. Completely forgot about that. It's very helpful though. So again, I forgot that they put this pin in there that holds the tensioner in place so that you can get the whole belt on, and then you gotta get under the truck and pull on the tensioner and then push or pull this little pin out. So that's always really handy that they do that. And then so now everything's tightened up, and basically what you can do is lock onto the tensioner again and double check all your belts are on there correctly. Now you should be able to read the writing, and then on the fan you should be able to see the ribs. So again, just triple check yourself that your belt is on correctly. They look good everywhere. We're inside the pulleys. Alright, happy with that. Okay, now we'll get everything, the hoses hooked back up. Okay, so I got my reservoir all cleaned up and super clean, super shiny. So we're gonna set that all there. So definitely make sure you clean your reservoir super good. Get all that crap out of there. I had a lot of junk in there. My advice if you're doing this install with the radiator out is once you go to put it back in, is try to get a second person to help you. That'll really make it easier so that they can hold it up here at the top, and then you can get under the bottom of it. What you see is I'm getting under the bottom to try and get the shroud to clear the petcock and the lower radiator hose mount. So eventually I just had to get my wife out here so that she could hold on to the top of it, and I could be under the bottom of the truck and prying out the fan shroud so that I could actually get it to clear. So it is kind of a pain in the butt, but if you can get two people, it'll really make it go a lot quicker. Okay, so you got everything hooked back up. Got the radiator back in. You saw how hard that was to sort of finagle it back in with the shroud, but I really think it's worth it to take the radiator out to give yourself all that room to work on all this crap, to get all that gunk cleaned off, and just makes it so much easier. So as you can see, I got everything mounted up back on. I didn't think you guys needed to see the process of me bolting back the radiator on. It's just 4 bolts. I would suggest, actually, if you can remember, put the hose on the thermostat first and then feed it down into there and then mount the thermostat. That way you don't have to mess with this upper clamp because it's really hard to get to. So that's my recommendation to make that a little bit easier. Now we're going to start filling this up. I got all my clamps back on here, but actually I'm going to take this one off because I do like to fill this one up a little bit, just to give it a little bit of a head start with the fluid. You can definitely fill that thing up a lot if you wanted to. I'm just going to start there. And we'll just fill up our reservoir tank. The rest of this bottle I have here. Trying not to make a mess here. What you can do if you get there is just squeeze the upper tube a little bit. You can try to basically pump some of it through the thermostat and everywhere else. Just get the air out. Till we get the motor on there just for now. And then we're going to get the motor started now, get our negative hook backed up and get going. Okay guys, so that's going to do it for the video. I hope you guys liked it, and it was pretty in-depth, and I think it's going to really help you guys out if you're getting into any of the cooling components. Now for anybody who hasn't ever finished off a cooling system before with the radiator fluid, I just wanted to touch on a few points. At the end of the video you saw me fill up the radiator and the overflow tank and everything, and those are really just the steps you want to follow. Once you get that done and you get your radiator cap back on, you're going to want to turn on the engine, turn on the heater on full blast inside the cabin, and let the motor run for 20 minutes and half hour. Just let it get really warm. And number one, it's going to help seat and warm up the gasket on your water pump and make sure that that gets seated really well to the engine block. And it's also going to help get the air out of the system. By working itself, it's just going to naturally work the air out of the system through the overflow tank, so you'll probably see some bubbles coming up through the overflow tank from the radiator hose that goes to it. And basically you just want to watch that, make sure that your overflow tank doesn't get sucked way down. Depending on whether or not you drained the 2 engine petcocks of fluid is going to tell you how much fluid you need to replace. I only did the passenger side, I didn't do the driver's side, and by doing just the passenger side and the radiator itself, all that fluid out, I only had to replace about 11.5 liters instead of the full 13. So just be aware that depending on how much you drain out of the engine block is going to determine how much fluid you need on hand. So for the last part of the video, I wanted to do a quick overview and long-term review of the parts that I replaced. Now again, the majority of these components I had replaced 6 years ago when I replaced the radiator. I didn't replace the water pump at that point, only the other parts like the pulley and the belts and the other things. So I wanted to do a quick review video on those so that you guys can just get a quick view of some of these components. Okay, so let's start with the water pump itself. Now these components, the water pump itself has 162,000 miles on it. The other components that we're going to talk about here have 92,000 miles on it. Again, so for this water pump, we went with the stock replacement Aisin brand. Again, this one has the Toyota right there, and you saw it the first video where they ground that off. But this still feels really, really good. So long-term reliability on these things is really, really good. I'm very happy with how long it lasted. Bearing feels great, no play in it whatsoever. O-ring still looks good. The propeller still looks good. The surface of the face of this still looks good. I mean, everything looks great. I had some type of issue where I just, over time, I must have just, my system got dirty. And even though I replaced the fluid, 92,000 miles ago, this is what you're looking at here is the weep hole where where this stuff comes out. And, basically it's just filled up. It's got all this junk in there, and it did its job. So it just, for my guess, is it just filled up with so much stuff that the fluid could not push it out. And so that is, the indicator that if it's coming out of there, something is wrong. So if you see that, like I showed you in those pictures in the first part of the video, you could give it a month or two, as long as your fluid levels aren't going down like crazy. You could give it a month or two to see if it stops. Like mine didn't, and so I just knew, I had to get in there and replace it. So Aisin brand, definitely a good replacement, and help us out with those affiliate purchases at the links supplied down below. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is the idler pulley, or the tensioner pulley. This again is the Dayco brand, and this one has the 92,000 miles on it. Again, it's showing like no wear whatsoever. I mean, these things are built like a rock, and it's spinning freely, but that's to be expected. But there's no play in the bearing. The tension on the spring still feels really good. I mean, when I took this off initially, or when I disengaged it to take the belt off, it still had a lot of tension in it. So again, if you're sort of strapped for cash, you could possibly not replace this. But if you're talking about a stock, one that you're replacing and at 70,000 or 90,000 or 100,000 miles, you should probably just replace it. But definitely go with that Dayco brand. You can't go wrong there. We'll talk about the idler pulley next. Again, this is a Dayco idler pulley and 92,000 miles. It also is showing practically no wear whatsoever. The only thing you can tell is that the bearing has some grittiness to it, so it definitely has been worked, a little bit, but that's to be expected with the placement being on the corner and the belt wrapping around it like a point. It definitely is taking a lot of tension, and so I'm really happy with the way that this is held up for almost 100,000 miles. So 92,000 miles, not too bad. Go with that Dayco idler pulley. The next part we could talk about would be the Toyota brand Thermostat. 92,000 on this one now, and again showing no signs of wear. The springs still look good. All the components inside still look good down inside of there, and the gasket still looks good. Basically the only thing you can tell is that this little initial spring is a little bit weaker than a brand new one, but that's to be expected. So go with that Toyota one. This was also the cheapest one on Amazon and was available through Amazon Prime. Now we can talk about the hoses. These are the Gates brand hoses again. 92,000 miles on these two. No cracks, no signs of wear. The only thing that you're going to notice is that the outside diameter is a little bit bigger than stock, and that's to be expected because of all the heat cycles that it goes through. The other thing I will note is that for the upper radiator hose, you will notice that a brand new one is going to be shorter in overall length than the hose that you're replacing. Now I don't know if that's due to the heat cycles that it goes through and it's basically longer when it comes off of there after a long time, after many years compared to a new one, or if the Gates actually makes it a ½ inch shorter than what the one is that you're taking off. I'm not really sure either way, but basically it wasn't an issue. You just need to drop your bottom clamp first on this upper radiator hose, pull on the top a little bit, and then drop your top clamp and it'll hold in place no problem. So no issues there. Definitely recommend those Gates hoses. The last component is going to be the Gates belt, and again 92,000 miles on this belt. There's no signs of wear, no dry rotting, no cracking, no nothing. I mean, this thing still looks practically brand new, and I mean, I'm just blown away about how a lot of these components still look really, really in good shape. We've done tons of cross-country trips, tons of mountain pass trips out to the coasts and back, and months on the road, weeks on the road, and no problems going through deserts, super hot deserts, and this bad boy has done really well. So really happy with all of these components. Okay guys, so that's going to do it for the overview and long-term review video and install video of this 2008 Toyota Tundra water pump and cooling components. Again, please help us out by supporting us through the affiliate links for purchasing any of these parts on Amazon. We really appreciate the support, and it'll help us bring you more in-depth review videos and installation videos. Please like if you like, subscribe, and check out the other videos. And thanks again for watching Nailed or Failed Reviews.